Of the workshop. What title do you have there in front of you?
Sorry about that. I'm not sure if you have actually. This is the first workshop, right?
Yeah, the global vision of the History Makers Academy. So what we were saying was that we owe Pastor Sunday such a debt of love and gratitude. But more than that, the best way to honor him is to produce something from what he's gone through for all of us to take this to the world. HMT was something that was born out of pain, born out of trial. If you know Pastor Sunday's story and the crisis that emerged here in Ukraine, it forced him to stop traveling. And it sort of unveiled the deception. And I don't know if he would word it that way, but maybe he would. The deception of just going from conference to conference preaching to people and the ineffectivity of that. And he began to discover that here he was preaching even to his own church of thousands, week after week. But when the crisis hit, so many of them fell away. And he began to sort of question the effectiveness of the way he was doing things. And I believe that that is a deception all over the world. That, we build churches for many reasons, don't we? And not all of them are to expand the kingdom. Not all of the way we do things in Christianity is even effective. Maybe it benefits us as the pastor or the leader in some way, but it's not the most effective. And what we're seeing all over the world now is a move to training and equipping. And Pastor Sunday and the HMT model is a first fruits of that, which is designed to equip believers to go beyond the four walls for the total transformation of society before the return of Jesus Christ. Do you know where you are today? You are here in almost like a mecca or a catalyst of something so effective, something that has so much grace on it. I've taken HMT to some very significant churches in the US and really the world. And oftentimes these pastors who experience it, they will say to me, I have never seen anything like this before. This is kingdom. This thing works. And we have the results to prove it. As you heard, our statistics of close to 300,000 people have been reached in the past 2.5 years. We've had impact in government. We've had open doors in different nations. I saw more in even doing HMT for 2 years than I saw in 12 years of ministry when I was pastoring. The thing just works. And the challenge that you run into is that most pastors and leaders feel there's nothing new under the sun. Or they feel that, this is just another thing. This is like, G12, and then there was this that came out, and then there's this. I'm telling you, this thing is altogether unique and different. And what church authorities are saying throughout the world, even C. Peter Wagner before he died, you probably know who Peter Wagner is, one of the foremost church authorities of our generation. He visited here to Kiev, Ukraine, and visited this church and analyzed it. And he said, I've been studying apostolic churches all my life, and I've never actually seen one until today. Sure. So everything that God Embassy does and puts out is like literally ahead of their time, a first fruits of what is to become the norm. And these church authorities are saying that in the body of Christ today, we're probably in one of the greatest, if not the greatest, church reformations since Martin Luther, maybe even since the book of Acts. That we're in that right now. We're in a crossover from pulpit-driven church to kingdom-driven church. And less than 5%, I bet you Pastor Sunday would say 2%, but less than 5% of churches in the world are effective kingdom-driven churches. Would you say that might be true? Absolutely. And so what happened when Pastor Sunday created the History Makers Training, because he was locked up here in Ukraine, was he he began to reveal the engine and the machinery behind this apostolic center that was transforming Ukraine and the world. He began to give away the secrets. Imagine system building being taught in church. Imagine conversion and all these concepts being taught and equipping people to go and get the astonishing results that we really need in society today, don't we? And so this is what HMT was born out of. When I ran into History Makers training, I had reached kind of a plateau in my ministry. I had led revival meetings for close to 7 years at that time. Pastor Sunday was mentoring me. And I had hit a point where God began to remove his glory from our services. And to my shock, after you've had revival, where do you go from there? All that was left was me trying to reproduce revival in my own striving, not knowing God was trying to lead me into something called discipling nations. God was trying to lead me into something called societal transformation. That's why my book was called Beyond the Four Walls, From Revival to Societal Transformation. And he began to introduce something totally new to me as a pastor. I'm a fourth generation pastor. My ancestors helped Charles Spurgeon start, the church. We just have pastoring in our lineage, and we that's what we do well. We know how to do it. And when I heard that Pastor Sunday was holding some unusual trainings here in Ukraine, I didn't even know what that was about. Training, homework assignments, red dots, pressure points. This kind of thing was absolutely foreign to me. And I was praying during that time, and many of you know this story probably already, so I'll try to breeze through it quickly. But I was praying, and I went and laid down on my bed. I didn't even open the sheets. I didn't go to sleep. The moment the back of my head hit the pillow, suddenly I was in something I hadn't had and haven't had since, but I was literally translated in the spirit to Ukraine. You know this story probably. This was totally out of my element. I was suddenly in Ukraine. I could smell the city streets. I could see the signs with a foreign language. I knew I was in Ukraine. And then, so you were staring like this at me, like, really? And then in the next phase of the dream, if you can believe this, I was in this room before I had ever been in it. This used to be a kitchen area, and I was seeing everything as it is here, although I had never seen it. And there were chairs all in a circle, and there were leaders I knew were present in the room. And Pastor Sunday was going around laying hands on all of them. And when he got to me, he laid hands on me, and then when he went to walk away, it was like the cry of my heart of just ineffective ministry. I saw the end of revival in our church. The cry of my heart just came out of me, and I shouted at him. I said, "I want more!" I shouted this, and I thought he would come and lay hands on me again, and instead, he stepped back, and he said, "If you really want more," and he named 3 things. And little did I realize those 3 things were the undertone and undercurrent of what the History Makers training actually is. When I came out of that experience, I was kind of gasping for breath, laying on my bed, and I felt just heat all over my body, and it was this totally unreal experience. And I began to try to reach Pastor Sunday the next day to tell him about this experience I had. And when I finally got a hold of him, it was like after midnight, and his assistant kept saying, "He's still teaching, he's still teaching." I thought, what could he be still teaching? He goes to the church, and then he comes back. I know his schedule. What is he doing teaching at after midnight? Because in those days, this wasn't necessarily happening. And I finally got a hold of him, and I told him this, and he began to laugh out loud. And he said, "Do you know, I'm holding a training right now. The training that you're describing, you were seeing, and it's just Russian speaking people here, so there's no way you could have known." And he said, "The 3 things you named are the things I'm teaching on." And he said, "This has been your Macedonian experience. You need to come to Ukraine and experience the English-speaking one for yourself." So I bought a ticket, and I flew here and had an absolutely horrible experience the first night. I was just totally shocked because in those days, I don't know what HMT you took, but in those days, It was tough. It was high pressured. I mean, you had to read a book a day, prove that you read it, answer 30 questions, plus the homework assignment. Like, people were just like dropping. Like, they were just, I in the lunchroom, I'd have my book in one hand and my soup in the other. I had to create a system to get through the day. I was eating power bars to skip meals to get the work done. Like, it was unbelievably intense, those trainings in those days. But I happened to come to one that became the standard HMT that we now use all over the world, that has become so effective. And I remember that first night just being terrified. And I went to my room and I thought, homework assignments, why did I sign up for this? Why am I here? This is not revival. This is not at church. This is something else. Maybe this is just Ukrainian. I don't know what this is. And I got to my room and I found out I was sharing a pull-out couch bed with somebody from France who I didn't know. And he was already sleeping and snoring. And they said, the first night you've got to get the most sleep because the training is so difficult. So I just couldn't wait to get to sleep. I did the assignment and I got into bed next to this guy and he was snoring so loud, and I went to the administrator and I said, actually, I paid for my own room. And it was Ludmila at the time. And Ludmila said something to me I've never forgotten that has become a very defining statement and philosophy behind HMT. I'm trying to really give you the heart of this thing here. She said, oh, Pastor Derek, not always given the most ideal environment to accomplish our destiny in. And we search, because we've grown up in church, or we've come into the kingdom through church, we actually enter the kingdom through a very comfort-based culture. So we expect the things of God to be always comfortable. And the reality is, when you want to do work beyond the four walls, you want to transform nations, you want to dethrone principalities and strongmen over countries and cities and regions and all of that, you're going to run into some very uncomfortable situations. You're going to pay a price, maybe even with your life. You wouldn't be the first martyr. And so that kind of shocked me, but because of his snoring, they brought me a cot. I found out that Ukrainian cots are different than Canadian cots. And I had to sleep very straight. And, 2, 3 in the morning, I couldn't get to sleep. And this is exactly what HMT was designed to do. All of a sudden, I began to get in touch with insecurities, fears, religiosity, pride, things that I didn't even know I had because I was always used to comfortable church. But suddenly when the pressure was turned on, and you might say, hey, that's not much pressure sleeping in a cot in a room, you're at Pastor Sunday's house. I don't know why that night for me, it really was high pressure for me. I think it was of the Lord. And I got to a point where I was like, I really wish I didn't sign up for this thing. And I'm afraid I didn't do well in school. I'm not so academic. And I'm kind of afraid when I go to do these assignments, I'm going to get these 3 red dots. And in those days, if you got 3 red dots, you had to pay to change your plane ticket and fly home immediately. And I thought, I'm going to be embarrassed in front of my mentor. I'm the youngest person here. These people are like doctors and scientists and government people. And I was like, what am I doing here? I'm just this uneducated young Canadian. And I was just terrified. And you know what? At around 3 in the morning, and I had to be up in 3 hours, I realized I'm not going to be able to complete this thing. This is HMT. This is what it's supposed to be. And it was at that moment that I prayed a prayer. I was almost tricked into praying. And it's exactly where God wanted me. Because true ministry that gets real results comes through broken people. Comes through people who know how to access supernatural power to do the work of the ministry versus their own strength. We have enough ministries out there based on somebody's own strength, don't we? We want the Yonggi Cho stuff. We want the Sunday Adelaja stuff. And as I lay there, I just broke before the Lord and I said, Lord, I give up. I'm not going to be able to do this training unless you do it through me. And it was at that moment, you've read this in my book probably, I felt the presence of God begin to fill the room, and the presence of a person walked over to the bed. And I believe it was the Lord Jesus walked over to the bed, and I heard him say, "You can fall asleep because I'll stay awake for you." And it was an exchange of my weakness, my inability, my insecurities, my fears, my stuff, in exchange for his apostolic grace. And I slept those 3 hours, and when I woke up the next day, I was a man on fire. And if some of the previous administrators were here, they would tell you, and just because it's us in the room, I'll tell you, I scored perfect in every single session. I was top scorer of every single session. Every single session. And I remember Pastor Sunday, when they would announce my name, he'd sit in the chair and he looked at me and he just went, "What is going on?" And I just kind of said, and when I completed the training, he took me for a walk and he said something I won't forget. He said, "There's brilliance in you, but it took the right environment to bring it out." And this is what's not being created in our churches today. We don't know how to create that environment that Jesus was able to create, that brought out the best in those disciples. I always say to people, many would be comfortable attending church, but wouldn't be comfortable following Jesus. He's asking you to get out of the boat and walk on water. You see there's no food. He's telling you, you have little faith, and he multiplies loaves and fishes. And, Peter, one day you're going to be hung upside down and martyred. And, these are history makers. And this is the price for it. So HMT, if you really want to know what HMT is, if you want to get past the hype and I want to do HMT, if you want to get to the root of this thing, it's actually a machine designed to bring you to the end of yourself and to bring you to a breaking point where you skip into light speed ability, where God is. We have had, in the past couple years, miracles take place in our HMTs. Illiterate people, to date, 2 people that were borderline illiterate, couldn't read and couldn't write, began to supernaturally read and write in our trainings. This has happened. Philip can attest to this. We have seen people who you thought wouldn't amount to anything excel and get high scores and then go on to start social projects and programs in society. This thing works. And that's really the heart behind what History Makers Training is all about, is to simulate pressure in such a way that it pulls out of you not only abilities you didn't know were there, but you reach a breaking point, or what we call the point of no return. And that point of no return is the place that most people back away from. So they never actually step into the fullness of their calling and ability. Tragic. Because of our comfort-based culture, we will approach that threshold and then we'll totally back off because it's uncomfortable. And I'll be talking about this later, this phenomenon, where you never actually cross that breaking point. And HMT was really designed to bring you to a breaking point where you come out of it changed and changed forever. Not just inspired, but changed forever. So when I came home, we began to hold History Makers trainings in our church. And what we did was we replicated almost exactly to the T what we had here. We made a couple minor adjustments for the sake of culture, but there wasn't much more that was adjusted. We used the workshops, the same system, and we made it a system, and we stuck with the system. This is what has actually made it so effective. When people say, Pastor Derek, you were able to take this to the world, or Professor Vincent, you were able to get these results, it's because we did it in such a systematic way. We replicated the system to a T. And it began to be so effective, we made it a national school in Canada and began to take it throughout the country. And idea and started some projects, and I began to see how easy it is to impact society if you can get out of the church. I'm sorry to say. Not get out and quit going necessarily, but if you can get beyond the four walls and be strategic. So we call these councils. So our goal is to raise up 1,000 trainers, each trainer in their ministry producing 12 of these councils. That would give us how many councils? 12,000 councils. Do you think 12,000 councils in the world would do something significant? Absolutely. Then those 12 councils should have between at least 10 people as part of that council. Giving us our goal, and if you've taken system building in any of these HMTs, you know what I'm doing here. Giving our goal of 120,000 history makers. That's our goal. To raise up 120,000 history makers. I want to accomplish this in the next 14 years. By the time I am 50 years old, and I haven't seen totally clearly what I'll do beyond 50, but I can see to 50. And this is my goal, to raise up 120,000 history makers in the next 14 years. And this again reflects a kind of commission that Pastor Sunday gave me, which was to try to raise up 1,000 people who can do HMT the way we're doing it. So you are the first. Hello. Wow. You're just the first. You're just here. Just a small group. You know what the death God had to take me through to get me past thinking I need to preach to thousands to small groups. Small is the new big when it comes to transforming society. Small group for multitudes. And that's why God is using HMT the way He is. What are our resources that we're working with? So the time factor is, you can put 14 years there. Our resources are the History Maker Society agreement. It's a partnership agreement that you're going to have opportunity to agree with at the end of this training. You're also going to have access to the History Makers training system and the full video training series. You're going to learn more about that. But basically, you can teach some of the workshops, and some of the other workshops you will have actual video that you throw up for your trainings. Or if you don't feel you're a strong speaker, you don't want to speak, you can actually do the whole thing via video. We've created that for you, and we're actually updating it in September, and we'll be shipping the updated videos to you. So we're in relationship and partnership, giving you full access to our resources, as well as you'll be able to receive, we have 5 History Makers trainings, if you can believe that. You're going to be able to receive the curriculum for all 5 as the others are turned into curriculum. You'll receive handbooks for that. You're also going to be receiving, and I'll talk about this more later, the Destiny and Transformation Mentorship Program curriculum. That's what we use to create these transformation councils. That's the Destiny and Transformation Mentorship Program curriculum. We also have the video version of that, and we'll get into that a little later. As well as connection with a director or mentor, and opportunities for leadership forums where we're able to help you to grow, help you to succeed, help you to reach various people groups. So that's going to be available for you as well. All right. What is the algorithm or steps that we take to produce these results? Number one is what you're doing here. You've become an HMT trainer. You're becoming an HMT trainer. And you're going to hold HMTs wherever God opens doors for that. In whatever sphere or capacity that you have, you're going to begin to hold HMTs and then take those graduates through the 18-week Destiny and Transformation Mentorship Program. It's an 18-week program. And then from there, you'll be able to form an actual transformation council. Now, you're going to have opportunity to be submitted to a director of some kind. So currently we have a director in Namibia, Pastor Carvin Isaacs. We have a director in Bulgaria, Ligia. We have, of course, Pastor Sunday. We have myself. We have, you'll have an opportunity to be submitted to someone. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you owe anybody anything, or it's not the old model of control or something like that. It's just an opportunity for you to be in relationship with somebody who's able to help you to succeed. That's really what it's for. And that director, what we don't want is you holding trainings and then being bogged down with trying to take people through the mentorship program, overseeing that, and then overseeing a transformation council. We want you to be able to focus on freely going and training. And doing what you want. You're free. Freely going and training. The director actually oversees the mentorship process that happens post-training. So it takes some weight off your shoulders. They also oversee the councils so that you don't have to be involved in that if you don't want to. Your focus is to train and equip and keep holding trainings. That is a busy enough job on its own. Getting bookings, all that kind of thing. Then so basically the director begins having relationship with the graduates from the training that you've just held. And then that director forms and oversees the transformation council that comes out of that. And your goal as a trainer is to see at least 12 councils of fruitfulness come from your life and your trainings. That's the goal. Those that become part of councils make up what we call the History Maker Society. So part of our global goal is almost like a church without walls. It's like these people don't have to leave their local churches, but these people are part of an elite society, not a secret society, but an elite society of people who have this gospel, who carry this message that Pastor Sunday has given to us, who reproduce it, who multiply it, who have effective ministries in their countries, in their spheres, and these are people who make up the History Makers Society. All right, and these directors make up what will be the Apostolic Council that oversees this whole process. And of course, if you know about system building, you know about having a control system. Essentially, our control system just relates to a once-a-month point of contact with your director, letting them know how things are going, the director assisting you, us giving you material. Do you know that we are producing material at a phenomenal rate, and if you become a trainer with us, we just give that to you for free. You just have access to that, all of that. And I think you spent on this training, what, $79.99 or something like that? You'll be shocked what we'll have to charge in the US and in Canada. But if you look at any kind of train-the-trainer system, whether it's John Maxwell or some of these guys, you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars to access their material. And we're just not doing that with you because we want the message to go out. We want this thing to spread. This message is very important. And we want you to be able to do it with ease and have access to all the materials that you need to succeed. And you're going to generate income for yourself. This is a bit of a small business that we're handing to you, literally. You'll be able to charge prices that you want based on your demographic. And there's a small, I think it's 10 or 20% that goes back to the Academy and ultimately back to Pastor Sunday. And he hasn't asked for that. We've offered. We want to do that. And that helps us produce everything that we're doing. But the rest is your income. That's money you're able to make. And so I hope you're not offended talking about money here. But when you get out there, you discover quick, I need to make some money doing this. I'm giving up 3.5 days of my life. I'm busy, running around. I need to generate some income. And so there is a financial part of this that you'll be learning about. So then you've also got, as part of the control system, so monthly evaluation from director. um, as well as some leaders forums we're going to offer on a particular platform like Zoom or something like that, where you can come online and be mentored on a fairly regular basis with myself or whoever we have on there working with you to just help keep you going, maybe monthly, maybe bi-monthly. We'll be working with you that way on what we call these leaders forums. So it's really forming a community. So it's 11 o'clock. This concludes our first workshop on the global vision of History Makers Academy. Before we jump into our next workshop, I'd like to hear back from you. What are some of your impressions? Maybe I'm putting you to sleep. Maybe this is boring for you. But when you start to get results, you will be calling me, thanking me. So tell me, what's hitting you with what you're hearing here this morning? And is this live or we're just recording it? Yeah, that's great. Great.
Okay, so it's so wonderful and lovely to hear that a God thing is being done with professionalism, with intention, with order, with system, because most of the time, at least my experience, like when we do God things, it's done haphazardly, it's done shabby.
Yeah.
So this is the first that's jumping out to me. This has been done with excellence.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Wow,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
All right. For me, what is really hitting is it's like an answer to prayer that I've always had. I came here in 2013, and I really wanted church growth because, like, I'm a pastor, and you get frustrated if you get to a certain number and you feel like you've hit a plateau, you're not going anywhere. But God changed all of that in such a dramatic way. And I went back home, and I got to a place where I wanted to implement this, but I just got frustrated, confused. I didn't know how to do it. So, coming here and hearing Pastor Derek speak like this, I have so much, I don't know what to put it, but I know that I'm going to be able to do it because, there's a system that's going to be able to guide me to be able to do it. And I feel empowered already. I feel like, I can go home and, do this and see our nation transform. So I'm really excited.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yes, just from what our pastor just mentioned, many, many years ago, I remember having a conversation with God, and I was telling him what was in my heart, and I was discussing with him, like, how can I be an influence? How can we, the body of Christ, be influential in society? Why don't we have any impact? People don't believe us. People are looking at that time I didn't know that's what they were looking for, but they're looking at where are the fruits. I didn't understand that, but I did tell God, I said, God, it was like I saw a group of people, not a large group of people, very, very small group of people that were sitting down and discussing, organizing how this gospel was going to reach the world. And they were sitting down and planning and strategizing. And I said to God, this that I see, I want to be part of it. Whenever it happens, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to preach this gospel, walk this Christian life in a strategic way, a way that will impact the world. And I said, God, when it happens, let me know. So that's what I'm seeing today. For me, that's what I'm seeing.
So who is the cry of your heart?
Yes.
You see, God knows who's to be here. So you're not here by accident.
No, for sure not. Since last 6-7 years, I've been teaching finances based on biblical principles, and I've seen people change in their minds, and in some cases, they have changed a lot in the practices, how to manage their stuff as per God's will. However, after, I get into HMT, I was sharing with Pastor Derek part of this. I started incorporating HMT into this ministry, and I've seen much better results, people understanding better why they have to do what they have to do as per God's will. And but my point, what I want to go now is just in these seminars, I have taught all this stuff with some structure, but I feel that has been just like the technical stuff. You have to do this in order that you live your life in order. But after this and getting all this knowledge that is gonna, unpack for us to implement all these things is with much more deeper purpose to help people and putting them in the right track to live their lives in a better relationship with God. It's not just to do something because I don't want to live broke, but to live in grace. Thank you.
For me, what got me is that the number. It's about, I like the fact that the number is not quite large.
Which number?
Like the 1,000 trainers,
Yes.
and then they bring in 12 counselors. Because normally I would think that when I live here, I should bring a crowd.
And your success is based on the
crowd. Yeah, but then when you were going through over it and telling us about the vision and the goals and everything, it made me realize that the number might not matter. And you say that you were 15 and then you end up being 12 or 14, and 13 of you got an award for that. That's amazing. Because normally I would expect that as soon as I leave here, I'm going to get a crowd of 100 people and I'm going to be teaching them. But I like the fact that it's not about the number, but what you're going to give and the quality of what you're going to give and how many people will be willing to continue with you on this journey. So, yeah, I'm going to take this one into mind.
Well, imagine Jesus did it with 12. And if anybody could gather a crowd, he could. Think about it. Think of the supernatural resources at his disposal to gather a crowd. And he actually would send the crowd away. You should be very suspicious of the crowd. Really and truly. That crowd will crucify you later. That same crowd. And he would do things like he would stand up and say, "Eat my flesh and drink my blood." That's not what I would say when the mega church starts. And they all turned away, and he said, "Are you guys going to go too?" This is the way of threshing out who is going to be a history maker, who has the heart of it. That's why it didn't matter to me even if 4 people came to this train. That's 4 more people that are going to have this effect on the world. That's the goal, is to really reproduce. And that's what Jesus did. In fact, he did it so well with 12 that he could leave the world at 33. Would have made a little more sense for Jesus to stick around longer, get another year in, another couple years of effective ministry. No, he left at the right time, and we are still living and experiencing the fruit of the history makers training he held with his disciples. Amazing, isn't it? And that's what you're doing. The HMT environment is actually to reproduce that environment that Jesus created, where he would actually sit around the fire close with the disciples, talking with them, inviting discussion, questioning, challenging, correcting, disciplining. This was the environment that Jesus would create. Very different than our Sunday morning environment, isn't it? So that again is the undertone, or one of the basis of HMT, is the environment that is attracting, bringing the best out of you. So I held History Makers training recently in Hamilton, Ontario, and we had something like 50 or 60 people attend. It was amazing. People flew from different places. And one of the comments, I think it was the pastor made, he said, I've never seen an environment like this before. It's not like church at all. You have people standing and sharing and speaking and arguing and you know, people are getting corrected for their work and they're disputing the correction and you know, it's this environment that you have going on here. I said, that's exactly what HMT is supposed to be. And so may it not be that you go out and try to hold an HMT the way you see pastors hold church. Forget about it. That's not what this is. Not, as T.D. Jakes said, this is not that. This is not that. It's different. And I was holding an HMT in Bulgaria. We've held 14 of them in Bulgaria. And we're now raising up some trainers there. And in fact, the effect has been, it's been so effective on their country. So many programs have started, feeding the homeless, drug addictions, rehabilitation centers started, all kinds of stuff happening in Bulgaria. If you've heard our story about Bulgaria, you know. And there was a man there who's a pastor of one of the most progressive churches in that country. He was featured in Forbes magazine for a business thing that he started with a partner in Germany. And he came. He asked if he could come and just sit in on one of the trainings. He wanted to know what this thing was. And he just sat there quietly through the whole thing. And it was a really dynamic portion of the training where like everybody was sharing. And if you know Bulgarians, it's very similar to the dynamic of Ukrainians, where what you would see here, just they're very serious about it. We're going to rebuild the country kind of thing. And at the end, he took me out for a meal. And I said, what did you think of what you saw? And he said, you know what impacted me the most was this HMT system gives people a chance to hear their own sound. Some for the first time, who have maybe never stood up and said anything in church, ever. And they've stood up and they begin to hear themselves because it's not, Sunday morning is very, your Sunday service is very get up, get dressed up, go, look happy, look married, look all these things, shake hands, cheer on your pastor, put money in the plate. Afterwards, tell your pastor that he's your favorite pastor and he did such a good job, and leave. Very performance-based. But in this environment, you have 3.5 days with people where the performance starts to fall off because they've lost sleep. They're scrambling to do homework assignments. They're in this environment where you're just not dressed up with your Sunday hat anymore. And you're being real. Your guts are coming out. And so for some of these people, they're sharing things and they can't believe what's coming out of their mouths. They can't believe that they scored perfect yesterday. People who are terrified to speak publicly are suddenly speaking, and the leader in them is coming out of them. It's bringing out the leader in them. And that same leader within them that they meet during the training is the leader that they go out into society as. And they say, hey, if I can speak up there, I can speak up at my job. I can speak up at, I can start a program. I can use this as a platform to do this and do that. Are you catching it? Yeah. This is the heart of it. Environment. So somebody else, what's hitting you? What's going through your mind? What are you thinking? Yes.
Thank you very much. I believe I've actually, had the privilege of pastoring for so many years too. But one thing I always come across is the fact that at some point I began to ask myself the question, what's more? The healings, the casting out of devils, the preachings, the spiritual exegesis, I've done all that. And then I'm like, what else is there to this? Because it became a routine. We just do the same thing all over again. The only thing is we just wait 7 days to repeat the same thing we did 7 days ago. And I believe, coming to HMT and exposing to DSA kind of like opened my eyes to what are the possibilities, or exactly what God wanted us to do, because it's beyond a routine, and it does not just have a method to it, because there's so many infinite possibilities that are connected to this whole HMT setup in helping people discover who they are, in changing the landscape of ministry from putting all the pressure on the clergy to putting it on the believers, and helping them discover who they are and what they're supposed to be doing, and actually helping them focus on channeling their energy and their focus on getting their own personal resource to their own personal vision, which is actually what the Bible talks about, equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. And then figuring out, because for me, I get very bored very quickly. I like to have a lot of ideas. And then coming into church is just like it's the same thing all over again. It's just, have different flavors of vanilla. Yeah. But it's still, the same vanilla we have every Sunday. We have the same script. So, like beginning to understand the structure of what ministry could be, how you can measure impact, how you can organize impact, how you can predict impact, and how you can know how much effort to put in and how much results to see in the society, beyond the four walls. Like right now, the church is basically stuck in the walls of the church, doing the same programs. And if people don't come to church, then you don't reach them. But with this system, it's a little bit, I wouldn't say a little bit, it's pretty much giving you the whole world so that you can launch out and also help other people to launch out and be the same that God asked them to be. So right now, it's like a huge breath of fresh air. So you have resources, you have people, and then you begin to tap into people's potentials and begin to help them also do what they're supposed to do. And you feel like you're accomplishing a lot more than you were accomplishing. Like you said, in the past 15 years, you've done ministry, and what you did in 2 years was a whole lot more.
It was completely different. It was like, wow, this is the gospel, okay.
And between HMT and April, I just came in April. And between April and now, during the Kingdom Fruits, I was telling them all the things I was able to do that I didn't think that was the gospel.
Wow.
I was able to start a nonprofit, more like a social enterprise,
So you have to celebrate things like that. That's not a small thing. A lot of Christians are too lazy to start a nonprofit. Bottom line, especially if you're pastoring a church and you start a nonprofit.
And August 5th, we're having our first outreach. Excellent. And we have 4 arms in it. One of them is the medical arm. We're doing a medical screening for over 300 people for free in the rural area.
Wow.
And
medical screening.
Medical screening.
For over 300 people.
300 people.
Totally free.
Totally free. And we're giving out 100 prescription glasses in those areas also. We had a lot of volunteers. So we created a system to get opticians to volunteer for that event and give them a normal fee.
This is how you do it.
And
now imagine producing hundreds of people that are thinking the same way you're thinking. Imagine that your training that you're doing is pushing people. I just was in Pennsylvania before coming here, and I finally got to see this new cowboy church movement that started with a graduate from one of our trainings. Reaching the lost, when you begin to see the effects that people are the things that people are doing after they took your training, you start to sleep a little deeper. You start to put your head on your pillow and saying, hey, I'm doing the Great Commission. You can't imagine how fulfilled as a minister that I feel these days. No, I'm serious. You can't imagine. I can't keep up with the stories that come in from graduates of our trainings. And I think, wow, this is what I want to do. I want results. This is what I want to do. Keep going. Yeah.
And I think, because it's a deviation from the conventional Christianity where you feel like it's more selfish and self-centered. because the day one basically helps you look at outside of yourself to what can I do for my society, and helping others see what they can do for their society that they've not been doing. So that deviation is number one door that helps people to open up. And because of our outreach right now, we're in touch with the king of that community. I began to have conversation with him. We're starting a prayer outreach in that community, organized by the king himself, because of what we brought to his community. Now, on top of that, we're giving them, pipe water, because they didn't have one in the village. We're sinking one. On the same day, we're doing the screening. So there's going to be a lot of chaos on August 5th in that village. And on top of that, we're giving micro grants to 100 widows. 10 widows. But it was like 100,000 naira for 10 widows. We're giving them, to go start a business. And then we're hooking them up with a business trainer to, we're not just giving them the money to go, spend on their meals, but we're hooking them up with someone who can train them in a skill set. So after the skill set, then they can take the money. But the money is already allotted to them. They probably take a 5-week training or 2-week training or 1-week training to maybe do fish farming or husbandry or something. And then they can now invest the money we give them to sustain themselves. So all of that program all in one day, and then getting in touch with the king, I felt it's already a revival without even going in there and just doing this.
Transformation.
Yes.
Discipling nations.
Yes. So I feel like this is what I've been expecting all this while, because at the point it became draining. It was as if I was expending more than I could actually give. And now to think of it, the venue that we were hiring, we paid for a venue in the U.S. that we're having our church. The amount of money we spent on the venue for 2 years would have transformed literally a whole community. Because
this is what most. I'm interrupting you just at this point to say this. This is what most pastors are feeling. Is the amount of efforts I'm putting in are not, the results I'm getting are not equating to the amount of effort I'm putting in. I'm constantly busy, tired, overworked, time away from family, little resources, and where's the book of Acts? Where's the effect of that? And that's what pastors are saying. So when they get into the HMT thing, they begin to see results. And they think, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, and it's just it's mind blowing, because even thinking about the amount of money we put into real estate and hiring and paying leases, if we translate that dollar amount and just don't do the conventional church, and take all that resources that we put into paying for rent, electricity, and all that stuff, transportation, time, and just take all that resource and go to the places, into these programs that we've designed, we would be hitting the ball out of the ballpark way long before now. And it was like we're just flushing resources down the drain with the conventional way of thinking that we were doing things before, thinking that was ministry. Because this kind of helps us to see what truly ministry is in terms of reaching out to societal problems or things that bother us the most that we want to tackle, and coming up with a system to deal with that. So it's for me, this is actually what I've been waiting for, and the results that I have so far is just I wish I had this 10 years ago. I knew exactly where I would have been, but I still thank God there was a timing to everything. But I feel like the History Makers training was just what God ordained, so that the church can be more effective. And it's very easy to make these impacts. You can make these impacts with your eyes closed if you can just figure out exactly what's the pain points.
Well, there are secular groups that are making impacts as far as transforming society more than the church is. One thing that happened in Namibia, I mentioned this to you, that I think when I met you at the anniversary, was the Namibian government was beginning to block evangelists from coming to do crusades. Because the complaint was, there's this like snake eating or something going on. There's these abuses going on in Africa, but they said, you guys come, you hold a big crusade, you take up thousands and thousands of dollars in the offering, and then you leave the country without paying taxes on it. And so they were beginning to block evangelicals from coming and ministering, but they said, we received the History Maker Society because you helped Namibians rebuild Namibia. You're actually coming to serve the country. It's a totally different approach, but it's an approach that transforms it. This is discipling nations. Somebody else, what's impacting you and hitting you?
I wanted to ask a question. I wanted to hear this again. You said we are the first group to be trained, to train other people to be HMT trainers.
Yeah, we have tried to train some people in the past, but we didn't have a system in place to effectively release them. So we have maybe 2 other trainers out there that we've kind of I've personally mentored and helped to get going. This is our first ever official Train the Trainers with contractual agreements, giving you the products, the videos, you are the first, you're the first fruits.
Bless God.
And here in Kiev, where it all started. The firstborn of many brethren. So you're not here by chance. I feel great pity for those who didn't register for this. The amount of people that have told me they want to do HMT, or the amount of people that have come here and said they're going to go do HMT. And, people talk so much, especially around here. You hear some talk sometimes. But when it really came down to it, here we were putting it on a plate for you. Like my team has worked hours and hours to put together stuff for you. And you're the ones that are here. It's too bad for those who missed. It's too bad. Suzanne.
Yes, for me it's like a favor from God that I can be here, because, well, I'm not even a pastor, and a little bit like you, I have done some studies in the university, but I'm not yet what I should become. And well, like you mostly like woke up my old fears that how can I do this again, and how can I go through, and like as I am myself, I always feel that I'm the smallest and the tiniest one, and like I really need God to help me, to give me the courage to do everything. And one question I would have, if I can ask, when you asked Pastor Sunday that you want more, and he said to you those 3 things, so could you tell us those 3 things?
I never tell those 3.
Okay.
I'll tell you what it had to do with.
Okay.
It had to do with self-development. I'm just kind of summarizing. He worded it differently, because had he said self-development in the dream, I would have been like, this dream was not from God. But if you know the direction Pastor Sunday has gone, the development of the soul, that was one of the things he said. And the other had to do with pressure and pain, which at that time I would have never received as well, because I thought, that's not revival. If it's, as my friend says, if it's not fun, we don't want it. And so one of them had to do with pressure and pain, and the other one had to do with system building, which I had no concept for. System building, that's not Holy Ghost. I was so lost. So those were, I'm just summarizing for you. I've written it down in my journal, but I never say it the way he said it. It might not make sense to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and we're going to begin again at 11:45. And this workshop at 11:45 is how to facilitate an environment for transformational change. That's important.